We are blessed to have a diverse group of attendees and are planning for a robust 40-minute conversation at the end of Minister Tang's remarks. Please post questions in the group chat. We will try to address as many questions as possible. Please address technical questions to Sam Dorios, who's the administrator of this call. This meeting will be recorded and posted in support of openness and transparency for a broader audience to be inspired. And now for some context for today. Just 81 miles from the mainland China, Taiwan has garnered global attention with just 447 COVID cases and 7 deaths out of a population of 23 million. Through the utilization of digital social innovation, Taiwan serves as a model of how technology can both fight a pandemic and strengthen a democracy. At the center of all of it has been Taiwan's digital minister, Audrey Tang, who is one of the world's top open source software developers and was recognized by Foreign Policy magazine as one of the top 100 global thinkers of 2019. Minister Tang is an extraordinary person. By the age of 36, Ms. Tang left a successful career in the tech industry to become the youngest minister in Taiwan's government as digital minister in 2016. Ms. Tang is also the first transgender member of the Taiwanese cabinet, which complements President Tsai's focus on LGBTQ+ rights. In the public sector, Minister Tang served on Taiwan's National Development Council's Open Data Committee and K-12 Curriculum Committee, and led the country's first e-rulemaking project. In the private sector, Ms. Tang worked as a consultant with Apple on computational linguistics and also worked with Oxford University Press. In the social sector, Minister Tang actively contributes to GovZero, a vibrant community focusing on creative tools for the civil society, with a call to fork the government. Welcome, Minister Audrey Tang, and now it's my pleasure to turn the discussion over to Minister Tang. Thank you.
Aloha, really happy to be here virtually, hopefully followed by in-person visits afterwards, and to share with you some thoughts around digital social innovation and how we counter the pandemic with no lockdown and how we counter the infodemic with no takedown. And democracy underlies our responses, and democracy improves as more people participate. Digital technology remains one of the best ways, as evidenced by this meeting, to improve participation between different cultures, as long as the focus is on finding common ground, not division. So social innovation is at the core of our response, and social innovation, I take it to mean people who participate from all walks of life in order to publicly benefit the society. And so we have 3 pillars in social innovation. Next slide. It's fast, fair, and fun. So let's talk about fast. Whereas many jurisdictions began countering coronavirus only this year, Taiwan started last year. Last December, when Dr. Li Wenliang, the PRC whistleblower, posted that there were 7 new SARS cases. Next slide. He got inquiries and eventually punishments from his local police institutions, but at the very same time, the Taiwan equivalent of Reddit, the PTT board, has someone with this name, No More Pipe, reposting Dr. Li Wenliang's whistleblowing. So our medical officer immediately noticed this and posted an order that says all passengers flying in from Wuhan to Taiwan need to start health inspection the very next day, which is the first day of 2020. So this says to me 2 things. First, that the civil society trusts the government enough to talk about possible new SARS outbreaks in such a public forum. And the government trusts the citizen enough to take it seriously and treat it as if SARS happened again, something we've always been preparing, yearly drills and all, since 2003. Next slide. Because of this open civil society, according to the Human Rights Watch group Civicus Monita, Taiwan is the most open society in the whole of Asia. I don't think they counted Hawaii as part of Asia when they did this conversation, but we're really, according to them, the only one in continental Asia and different parts of the Indo-Pacific Ocean. I think we and New Zealand, if you count that part of the world, are the only 2 completely open places that enjoy the freedom of speech, of assembly, of the press, and so on, as as every other liberal democratic countries, but with the emphasis, because we're a very, very young democracy. First presidential election was in 1996, to keep an open mind to new novel idea from the society, as in democracy is just another set of technology that we can improve. And that's also why our schools and businesses never went into a lockdown and still remain open today. So next slide. One example of collective intelligence. Every day, our Central Epidemic Command Center, the CECC, holds a press conference which is live streamed. They only shifted to weekly after we're now officially post-pandemic, but they kept this on for more than 140 days. So we work with the journalist community, answer all the questions in all the live stream conferences. And whenever there's new idea coming in from the civil society, anyone can use this very radically old technology called telephone, landline, toll-free number, and call 1922 and tell that idea to the CECC. So there was one day in April where a young boy who said, okay, everybody has mask because we ration mask. But when you ration mask, you don't get to pick the color. And all he had was pink medical mask. So he doesn't want to go to school and tell the CECC that the classmates may laugh at him for wearing a pink medical mask. The very next day, everybody in the CEC's press conference started wearing pink medical mask. You're looking at our Minister of Health and Welfare, Commander Chen Shizhong, in the middle. And so it suddenly became the most hip color. And the kid became the kid with the most hip color mask. So everybody learns about gender mainstreaming, which is also social innovation. So this kind of fast response builds trust between the government and the civil society. Next slide. Another focus is fairness. For example, when we ramped up the facial mask production, making sure that everybody can use their national health insurance card to collect medical masks from nearby pharmacies, and we donate them to overseas, fairness is the guiding principle. Next slide. Not only do we publish the stock level of medical masks in all the pharmacies, as you can see on the picture, this particular pharmacy on the Penghu Island has 58 adult masks in store and 196 children's masks in store at that time. We actually publish at a time every 30 seconds, which makes it not just open data, but rather open API. And that's why GovZero, and which is a civic group, and many community contributors built more than 140 tools that enable people who, for example, prefer viewing a map, or people with blindness who prefer to hear from voice assistants, as well as people who are using chatbots like the Line platform, very popular here. All of them can get the same inclusive access to the information about which pharmacy near them still have the mask. And because Taiwan's NHI coverage is a single-payer system covering 99.99% of not just citizens but also residents, people who show any symptom will then be able to take the medical mask from a nearby pharmacy, go to a local clinic, knowing for sure that they will get treated fairly without incurring social or financial burden. And this also enabled people to participate in this distributed ledger. You can just go to that pharmacy literally and swipe your NHI card and collect if you're an adult 9 masks per 2 weeks or 10 if you're a child. And you actually see after a couple of minutes, the number become 49. Because you know that this distributed ledger is updated very regularly. If rather the number increases, you will probably call 1922 right there because something is wrong with the system, which is why nothing went wrong with the system. Next slide. This also enables civic technologists to make dashboards like this one that lets people see that our supply is indeed growing, that we're ramping up, as you can see on the graph below, and also show us where in Taiwan do we have an oversupply or undersupply, and so we can adjust that with the pharmacists based on the real feedback of the pharmacist. And so this ordering system is iterated weekly, co-created with the whole of society. And so based on this analysis, you can see, I think it peaks at 70% of population. There's just 30% of people in large municipalities working very long hours, and after they work, until 10 p.m. or something, all the pharmacies have already closed, and so there's no way that they can get their rationed mask. And so we need to fix the problem for these people. Next slide. So you can see our premier, Prime Minister Su Zhenchang, smiling very happily here, because that's the day we started working with convenience stores. That was in March, which can take the same NHI pre-ordering, and you can collect your mask there anytime, 24 hours a day. And so we ensure fairness of all kinds. Next slide. Now, my favorite part, the fun part. So, I would like to stress there's nothing inherently funny about COVID. This is a very stressful time. People feel anxious. There's a lot of panic buying, a lot of conspiracy theories. But in Taiwan, our counter disinformation strategy is very easy to remember. It's called humor over rumor. So when there is a panic buying of tissue papers, for example. There was a rumor that says, and I quote, it's the same material as facial mask. We're going to run out of tissue paper soon, unquote. And so there was panic buying. Next slide. So the same premier you just saw smiling in the previous slide now shows his bottom, wiggling it a little bit, and says in very large print, and this rolls out within just a couple hours after the rumor started, that says, we only have one pair of Botox each. It's a wordplay, because in Mandarin, stockpiling and Botox sounds the same. It's tuan is the same sound. So meaning that we don't need to panic buy. And then it shows a very clear table saying that facial masks are produced using Taiwanese domestic materials and tissue paper are produced using South American materials. And this went absolutely viral. This mimetic package, literally a tissue paper box package, maybe have an R value of 6 or 10 or something. So because of that, everybody who saw this viral meme is vaccinated. They laugh instead of feeling outrage when they see the conspiracy theories. And so the panic buying of tissue paper died down within a day or two. And finally, we persecuted the people who spread a rumor at the first place. I think the 3 of them were tissue paper resellers. And this was not just a single shock point in social media. Next slide. Every single day, our CECC daily press conference gets translated by the Minister of Health and Welfare spokesdog, or 总裁, the doji, the dog CEO, that translated, for example, on the upper left, physical distancing rules. If you're outdoors, you have to keep 2 dogs away. If you're indoor, you have to keep 3 dogs away. And remember to cover your mouth and nose when sneezing, and wear a mask to protect you from your own unwashed hands. And remember to pre-order your mask and so on, all into very cute dog memes. And because all of them goes viral, we make sure that our humor, our factual humor, spreads faster than rumor. And this is how we make sure that Taiwanese people still feel calm and collected even during this pandemic. So that was my very brief overview. Next slide. And please feel free to drive this conversation with questions. A lot of the details are in this crowdfunded and crowdsourced website called taiwancanhelp.us, or you can also pronounce it taiwancanhelp.us. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Tang, for that wonderful overview. Really appreciate that. And so I'd like to ask the audience to please put their questions in the chat. We weren't sure how many people were joining us today. We just wanted to manage that effectively. And while people are doing that, I guess one question that we had for you, Minister Tang, is what's the ingredient for your success? How's your team able to respond so quickly and to the challenges that Taiwan has faced?
Well, my team is literally 23 million residents and citizens. It's not my idea. It's a random civic technologist from Tainan City who decided to build a mask availability map. This is what I call reverse procurement. In traditional procurement, the public official have to come up with an idea, ask the Korea Public Service to draft a spec, and then you ask the economic sector to maybe, post the tenders and so on. And then they start working with the social sector, the feedback of this public service. And the mask map works entirely in reverse. This is a random civic technologist in Tainan just doing this map for his friends and families. His name is Howard Wu. And then the press loves it. And so basically he owed Google, I think, 20K US dollars just in the couple of days that it started running because it's too popular. And because it's popular, we already know that people love the idea. So when I show it to the premier 48 hours later, the premier said, okay, we must support this young person and we need to do everything, open API and all, to make sure that the service keeps running. And so we negotiate this with Google and also work with many open source people to lower the cost. And at the end, there's 2 maps, 1 chatbot at the day of launch. And after just a week, make more than 100 different applications. You just can't get that with traditional procurement. And so I think when the social sector says something, the society thinks it's a great idea. The economic sector, like Google, supported with their resources. The public sector's role is just to support, not drive the direction of the innovation. That's why I call it social innovation.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a couple of questions coming through the chat. I'm going to read one of the questions here about trust in government. What is the role of technology in building trust for government agencies with citizens when there is a deep-rooted skepticism among many citizens in the reliability and integrity of government data, its timeliness, and in the government's ability to gather and analyze and report data?
So first of all, we do not collect new data for the pandemic. The government doesn't collect data. And this is a very radical way of thinking about things, right? If you go to a pharmacy, you swipe your NHI card, that's a transaction between you and the pharmacy. In the distributed ledger, make sure you and everybody queuing after you can make sure that this is a fair transaction. They actually got 9 medical masks if you're an adult or 10 if you're a child. And there is nothing in the government that says, oh, we must look at this number and we publish after only a week of review or things like that. No, it's machine to machine, it's real time. And so because it's the citizens observing or even collecting those numbers themselves, doing their own analysis, as you can see on the dashboard, it bypasses the problem of the Freedom of Information Act loop cycle, where the citizen must first discover there's something that's worth publishing, and the government need to have a person, a human, looking at the number, whether to publish. No, this is entirely end-to-end innovation. If you decide a data point, for example, air quality, measurement is important. You just start measuring it in your balcony or in your school and join this distributed ledger and to amplify your numbers to everybody in Taiwan. I mean, in Taiwan, when you think about the air pollution and PM 2.5 or whatever, people do not turn to the government. They trust their local primary school teachers and people who volunteer their balconies and so on. So there's tens of thousands of like micro weather stations, each less than $100. And because we have broadband as a human right, anywhere in Taiwan, you're guaranteed to have 10 megabits per second in 4G, unlimited data connection, or 5G just opened yesterday. But anyway, unlimited 4G for just $16 per month with no cap on data. And so because of that, everybody can just very freely join this data collaborative, as I prefer to call it. And that makes sure that the trust is mutual. It's between citizen groups and citizen groups, or between pharmacies and convenience stores and the consumers, the buyers of medical masks, and not between the citizen and the government. We don't do the citizen government zero-sum thing. We do multi-stakeholder trust, and that is a different trust architecture. Think Ethereum, for example, for a very similar trust architecture.
Thank you for sharing that. And given that the amount of transparency that exists in Taiwan and what you described, how would you describe privacy? Any privacy concerns? Do the people have privacy concerns? And I'm curious as to how it's different than in the United States, where there's sort of big data.
Oh yeah, people have a lot of privacy concerns, and that is why we do not have a contact tracing app, because people would not trust anything that would broadcast their whereabouts either via Bluetooth or some other technologies to any other people. Our winning entry, one of the 5 of the coronavirus hackathon or collaboration hackathon, depending, at cohack.tw, which is a joint Taiwan-US consultation. The top team has an app called Logboard, and it logs your whereabouts, your temperature, your self-reported symptoms, whatever, but it doesn't transmit anywhere. It works in airplane mode. It's strictly in your phone. And the value proposition is that when the contact tracers do come for you, you can just press this and generate a one-time link specifically with the de-identified data that the contact tracers need without divulging the private details of your friends and families, as you would traditionally do in a traditional contact tracing interview. And so that shows how people value their privacy and would do anything to make new technologies that are privacy enhancing.
Thank you, Dr. Tang. Okay, we have a couple more questions coming in, and one of them is related to economic question. What is your digital strategy for opening tourism in Taiwan, and how will the coronavirus impact tourism?
Yeah, the domestic tourism market, we call it revenge tourism, meaning that because people can't visit the US as they often do around this season of the day, because the summer vacation is soon starting, and people often go to, say, Hawaii or at least Okinawa or any of the specific islands. New Zealand also very popular, but they can't yet, right? Can't easily anyway. And so because of that, they do the tourism domestically with a lot more renewed look, because Taiwan is not just one island, right? We're also a bunch of islands. So maybe they go to the Penghu Island, the Orchid Island, the Xiaoliuqiu Island, and so on, and they do a lot of tourism there across different islands that compose our country, which was the official name, Transcultural Republic of Citizens. In any case, the point here is that we also have a lot of stimulus packages. We just rolled out a stimulus program yesterday, reusing the same map you just saw for Musk for the triple stimulus vouchers, reusing the same pre-ordering system. And so the idea, actually very simple, is that if you spend $100 via credit card or whatever on anything that requires you to go outdoors, so no Uber Eats, you have to go to a physical restaurant and then go to tourism, and you spend US $100 and register that consumption with us. We don't want to know what you bought, just the amount of money. And then with your same credit ATM card, you can on a nearby automated teller machine after 8 days back in cashback 2/3 of that money. And because it's cashback, you're very likely to also spend it. And so that's how we created a stimulus package for domestic tourism.
That's very creative. Thank you for sharing that. Let's see. How does the Taiwan government support broadband and making it a human right?
Yeah, my favorite topic. As a junior high school dropout, if it not for internet as a human right, I wouldn't be here because I got all my education online. So the broadband as human right is basically designed through a very innovative auctioning system. So we deliberately, for example, in our 5G auction, and very similar things happened in 4G and before, in our 5G auction, because we have 5 competing telecoms, and we only allocate like 3.5 telecoms worth of in the sub-6 GHz band. So they auction a lot of money for those premium spectrum because it's common property after all. And so at the end of the day, what we did is that we ensure that this very high spectrum auction bidding money is earmarked to make sure that the places with the least choice of 4G connection get 5G deployment first, and with a lot of packages for health and education in particular. And so using this creative auctioning strategy, we make sure that even the telecom that do not want to build, for example, telecommunication in the Orchid Island will be incentivized to do so because they essentially get paid by the extra money that the other telecoms bid for the main Taiwan Island for the low resource areas. And I can go to a lot of details. This really is my favorite topic, but that's the basic idea. And broadband as human right really is the campaign promise of President Tsai, and we've delivered, I think, more than 90% on it.
Thank you. And broadband is a very hot topic in Hawaii as well. Being an island state, and in the rural areas, we find that broadband is often lacking or weak, especially now with everyone working from home and going to school at home.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Taiwan can help. Taiwan can help. We're working on low Earth orbit satellites that hopefully will help, and also drones carrying antennas and things like that. Yeah.
Oh, great. We'll follow up on that. Thank you. Okay. Next question. Aloha, Audrey. It sounds like Taiwan's commitment to equity, citizen science, and smart technology is paying dividends. Knowing these are each important factors in social innovation, where would you suggest Hawaii start?
You can start small, right? In Taiwan, if you ask a random person on the street in 2012 or 2013, do you think that there would be a minister that literally works in the park every day, walking to work, and you can see people outside? Actually, I think they're throwing some kind of party or events around the global goals. But in any case, so this is literally a park. Anyone can walk in and have 40 minutes of my time every Wednesday, and they can see very transparently that I'm having a video call with Hawaii. And so the point here is that I bring the technologies and officials to where people are. I'm not asking the people to come to technology or to adapt to technology, and that is a core principle. And I didn't come up with this idea myself. This is what we co-created during like the various weekly meetings, 4 of them, that shaped this social innovation lab, which is really the place that I'm teleconferencing in. And this soccer field, for example, are public art made by people with Down syndrome, with trisomy chromosomal differences from us. But they look at the world through, like Van Gogh, a very topological geometric view, and they just paint whatever they see. And in the basement, we also have professional facilitation workshops that is completely in the dark, led by people with blindness. And what I'm trying to get at is that instead of saying that, oh, these are vulnerable people, we must support them. No, we discovered the places where they can support us and offer a very different viewpoint. And so I tour around Taiwan discovering the people doing such social innovations. And they can all just gather in their local town hall, sometimes with the help of indigenous language cultural translators, because we have 20 national languages, including many indigenous. And people gather here in the kitchen, sharing good food, music that always helps. And then they're public officials from 12 ministries. And they listen to people's stories. As I tour around Taiwan, people stay in the municipality, listen to the rural people's stories and challenges, and do a connected room to make sure that first, actually, we can see each other much more clearly this way. We don't have to wear a mask. Also, it makes sure that the people in the central government get the whole story, not just abstracted some PowerPoint slides. And so just connecting different rural and urban places together, making sure that we bring decision-making, empowering the people closest to the pain. It's just video conference technology, it's WebEx. Come on, you can do it. We are using WebEx, right? So and if you regularly do this, like predictably every Wednesday as I do, then it very visibly increases the trust between civil society groups and the government.
To a certain degree, we've seen that now in Hawaii as well. And I don't know if we were collectively big teleconferencing users, but it's nothing like a WebEx or teleconferencing provides a very interesting, unique intimacy between different stakeholders that in some ways is really helping us to connect together. Thank you for that. As an island country, has Taiwan had issues with sourcing food and imports coming from other countries during this time?
Well, we have a really good agricultural sector, and we have this idea of strategic reserve. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, there was also panic buying of instant noodles, and we make very good instant noodles. But then the premier also wrote out a meme saying, let's just buy all you want, which is not what you hear from many other premiers around the world at the times. But that is designed to show that we actually have more than a year and a half in reserve. So buy all the instant noodle you want, but remember to eat your vegetables. And then the premier adds some posts with lots of vegetables to go with the instant noodles. So no, we didn't have that problem.
That's another example of the value of humor during this time. Thank you. In previous presentations online too, you've touched on using Polis as a way to really get public input on policies. Could you describe Polis and how you've used that in Taiwan?
Sure. For a past conversation about police, you can actually just check out Kohack, which is how we get a consensus on what to develop for the counter coronavirus technologies. There were 5 Polis conversations right there. And for an even older conversation between AIT, the de facto US embassy, and Taiwan, you can look at AID 40, which is a Polis conversation around the 4 topics of how to make sure that we have a strong foundation, the digital dialogues, at the collaborations between promoting Taiwan's role, economic, security, and people-to-people ties. And so these 2 are really AIT TechRo partnerships. But now we're running a domestic Polis conversation, and that is maybe also interest of Hawaii because it talks about how people can understand the ocean more and get more into this habit of thinking as it was a very large footprint really on us with 10% of the Earth's marine species and get this message out that ocean sustainability is every bit as important as land sustainability. So this one is highlighting the importance of oceans, and that's going on right now for the next 28 days. And so in the Polis conversation, you can see for each topic where your friends and families are, and this was, I think, the original UberX conversation in 2015, where people have a lot of differences when it comes to whether UberX counts as sharing economy, platform economy, or whatever. And then we just said, no, we asked a very specific question. There's someone with no professional driver's license driving their own car to work, and they make a long detour to pick up a stranger and charge them for it. And how do you think about the situation? And so people feel very differently, but they're all friends and families. So you see familiar faces. They're not nameless trolls or anything. So this is not anti-social media. This is pro-social media. And as you answer the questions, which are sentiments from your fellow citizens, like I think insurance for the person in the back seat is very important. You can press agree or disagree. As you do, your avatar moves toward the people who feel more similarly to you. But there is no reply button, so there is no room for troll to grow. And so this is pro-social media because every time we run this conversation, we see maybe like 5 or 3 controversial points. But actually, most people agree with most of the neighbors on most of things most of the time. Everybody in the UberX conversation agreed that registration, insurance, and taking care of the proper use of roads, these are important. Road safety, very important. And so we legalized based on those rough consensus. When we did a co-hack with the US, it was across many different countries, actually. So we have very different norms. At the end, there were 7 countries, 53 teams participated, and they have very different ideas. So the idea is that we table, we acknowledge, but we do not work on those controversial statements. During co-hack, there was a statement that says we should develop a assistive intelligence in AI that looks at everybody who come to ICU, and instead of first come, first serve, evaluate how many remaining contribution they're going to make to the society, and only treat the people who are going to make the most remaining contribution to the society, which is, by the way, illegal in Taiwan. And we say that very clearly. Our human rights assessment says it's illegal. But then people see it as very divisive. And so anything that is divisive, we do not work on it. We only work on the thing that has rough consensus, and that is how Polis works.
And since the Polis is an opinion-generating app, do you find same equal levels of participation from members of government as well as members of the community?
Definitely. Because the stakeholder groups, if you mobilize a lot of people to vote the same as you, it doesn't increase the area of your group. Because the group is counted on diversity and plurality. It's not counted on the numbers. So numbers doesn't count. It's not a tallying. For a agenda to be binding, you have to really convince every other groups. You must achieve a supermajority in all the groups as well. So that's also a competition, but it's like competing on how can we post a more nuanced conversations, more nuanced topics. For example, during the people-to-people ties, in the AIT 40 digital dialogue, one of the most controversial statements was Taiwan should make English the working language right now. Even France have done that. And exactly one half of the group disagree and one half agreed, maybe based on their English proficiency, I'm guessing. But anyway, but then the people competed to post it in a more eclectic way. And so the top consensus was Taiwan should work toward, maybe in 2030, the idea of a bilingual nation where the children grow up feeling very fluent in both English, international, and also their native tongue. And now phrased this way, everybody agrees. And so it leads to a friendly competition between the people who have the different versions of their positions, but manage to find out common value that also resonate with people with a very different vision.
Thank you. Thank you for those examples. We're definitely going to be taking a close look at Polis and seeing how we can use that here in Hawaii. We have lots of alohas and thank yous coming to you for Minister Tang from our attendees. And another question that we have is, how do you motivate government workers to take the risk on implementing creative ideas like digital literacy?
So this is a very interesting question because digital literacy in Taiwan is not called digital literacy. It's called digital competence. We don't have media literacy curriculum. We have media competence curriculum. And it's very different. When you say media literacy, or data literacy or digital literacy. When you say literacy, you assume people are reading or consuming information. This is about viewing TV and not to be captured by the propagandists, right? But when you say media competence, you assume the children are producer of media, and they are. They probably have more Instagram followers than I do. And so because of that, the idea is that everybody is a amateur journalist. People need to learn journalist skills. Checking your sources, not being taken away by the framing effect, and things like that. That's just like basic hygienic practice, right? So if you treat people as producer of data, producer of media, and producer of digital knowledge, then the kind of curriculum design is based on what they want to solve. And the education system just supports their vision of the society's development towards sustainability and inclusion, of course. However, if you assume them as a very top-down thing, just iterating what the teacher have taught and things like that, which is a very collectivist view, then no amount of digital literacy work can help you because the digital landscape changes ever so fast, and everybody wants to be a producer. They really do not want to be a consumer only of information. So that is the real strategy, is to motivate people to solve their problems in their lives, in their communities, and contribute, like through university social responsibility programs and so on, making sure that when people in any level of education, even lifelong education, they focus their energy on creating something, co-creating something with the people, not for the people. And that's the main difference between literacy and competence education.
Thank you for your insights. Things for us to absorb as we continue to kind of craft our digital literacy and digital communications and broadband strategies here in Hawaii. Have you experienced any kind of resistance in expanding social innovation in Taiwan? Are there any kind of skeptics out there in terms of digital social innovation?
But there's a lot of skeptics. Anyone who criticizes our, for example, tax filing system or the mass distribution system or whatever, anyone who posts like flameful, toxic comments on social media, I personally reply and invite them to the next co-creation meeting. And so that's the ticket, right? When you're in the kitchen, all the food smells very good because you made it. You're a co-chef. And when you're just sitting at the table demanding for food, even though it's a perfect food, you don't feel it that way because you did not participate in the co-creation session. And so outrage is great because it points out that people care about something. And as soon as people complain, for example, there was a petition that says tax filing are explosively hostile to its users. So it turns out that for Mac and Linux, that was 3 years ago, we used Java applets, and Oracle dropped Java support at that yeah. And so for them, it's really very painful. For Windows users, not so much. And so we ask all the Mac and Linux users to co-create, actually only those who complain, who co-create the text filing experience. And the next year, which was 2 years ago, it won approval rating of 94%, that unheard of, because thousands of people would say, oh, I have a post-it note, contribute to it. So they would educate their friends and families. And Windows users are very jealous. They have to borrow a Mac to file their tax to try out this new HTML5 thing. And then very next year, it spread to the Windows users as well, and with 96%, again, unheard of, approval rate. And that's because people say it's our work, it's not government work. And that's how we work with people who are skeptics. It's like, okay, you're a skeptic, that's great, let's see your version.
Thank you for sharing that very much. Has Taiwan involved students in schools to share their thoughts for designing the future as the economy recovers?
Yes. The economy was really never sick, but internationally maybe a little bit. But we never closed any businesses, did we? Oh, right. We said that any businesses that cannot keep a safe physical distance need to look at their physical distancing rules. So for a month or so, the intimate bars where escorts accompany people in drinking, to put it mildly, did close because they could not think of a way to keep a physical distance while keeping their business in operation. But even those intimate bars reopened, I think, a month after that, because they discovered if you wear a cap with the plastic shielding, you can both drink, sit very closely, maybe shake hands, but with no, problem on the physical respiratory disease part. And so once that social innovation came about, they reopened the intimate bars. So in any case, the point here is that people understand the science behind it. And so people, for example, our vice president at the time, Chen Jian, online course that anybody can click and learn. I'm one of the 20,000 people who participated in learning what our value means, the interactive models and things like that, so that we're not following orders. We're each of us creating how to maintain normal or businesses or school or things like that, given the scientific constraints on what we understand about the virus. So that's the first thing. And the students, of course, they're also very active in shaping the post-pandemic period as we are already in. Just yesterday, I met with 30 new interns in my office, and they're now going to work in 7 different digital services that they most dislike, that are most hostile. And it's a team of 1 designer, 1 engineer, and 1 project manager in each. And they're going to interview all the different stakeholders. For example, last year they did a mountaineering hiking portal where they interviewed the mountaineers who complained the most about the mountaineering permits or whatever experience. And they co-designed a new website, a new experience that didn't take any of the existing experiences away, but it works like a booking agent and connects to all the different backend services. So the young people are pointing out the direction, while we, the older people, are supporting them with the power and the resources that we have.
The future is bright with the kids working on those kinds of innovations. Thank you. We have a couple more questions, and then we'll have to probably start wrapping it up. Can you share, Minister Tang, Taiwan's efforts around the UN Sustainability Development Goals? That is an effort in Hawaii. And I suppose being island territories, we have a natural gravitation to the UN Sustainability Goals. So we would appreciate your perspectives on that.
Definitely. We index every single part of our work with the SDGs. You can see it in our social innovation platform. You can see it in our presidential hackathon, which is every year we ask people what they want to tackle, and they have to select a precise SDG targets, and we put them all to voting. It's a new voting system called quadratic voting that allows people to fairly distribute their social preferences, and we choose 24 this year so that they become cross-sectoral, like three sectoral data collaboratives and tackling specific SDG issues. So I often speak in just SDG icon language, which is like, I don't know, iconography, like in the movie Arrivals. It explains for itself. It doesn't need a writing system. And then people choose the teams, and the teams work for 3 months, prototyping, sometimes with a lot of leeway in interpreting existing law, like on telemedicine, very important across the islands. And then the 5 winning teams each year receive a trophy from the president. And the trophy is the shape of Taiwan Island and with a microprojector. So when you turn on the trophy from the presidential hackathon, a smiling President Tsai Ing-wen will be projected looking at you, giving you the trophy. So the trophy describes itself. And the president will promise that the sustainable development target that you work on for the 3 months as a prototype will become national policy in the next 12 months. Is my presidential promise. And so that's this executive power as a hackathon award. And that's how we index the work that we do. And so I'm no exception. I mean, I'm a digital minister, right? And people often ask, what does digital play in the realm of the SDGs? So I have this lovely Venn diagram. I love Venn diagrams. That says in the social and environmental and economic pillars, the digital is on the 17th. It's making sure that people can hold each other to account to make sure that there is reliable data for the cross-sectoral collaboration, effective partnership so that we can meet across space and time, and also open innovation so that we can share the fruits of our work with the entire world without getting trapped by zero-sum games. And I even translated those SDG targets, 17, 17, and 17, 18 to be precise, into my job description, which I would read to you because it's very short, and I think it captures the SDG 17. So my job description literally is this. When we see the Internet of Things, let's make it the Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear the singularity is near, let us always remember the plurality is here.
That wins the award for best job description ever. Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, Minister Tang, and then we'll probably start to wrap it up in the interest of your time, because I know you have to get to another meeting. As you know, in the United States, we are experiencing protests, demonstrations, and other calls for radical change. Can you talk about the Sunflower Movement and its relationship to digital social innovation?
Well, yes, when I said that in 2013, nobody would imagine this kind of essentially direct democracy, participatory democracy going on, I was referring specifically to the 2014 Sunflower Movement. And the Sunflower Movement, in very shortly, is the idea that there was a cross-strait service trade agreement, or the CSSTA, which was considered by the administration as a regulation, not as a law-level conversations. So the MPs refused to have a substantial deliberation about that. And so basically, people occupied the parliament saying that MPs were on strike. So we're back to where they are doing their work for them, which is deliberating the CSSTA. And the 20 or so different NGOs all deliberated on one different aspect. For example, there was one side of the parliament that talked specifically whether we need to allow PRC components in our then new 4G infrastructure, and whether there is something as a market player in the PRC, or it's all state-owned if needs be, and things like that, which is the conversation that people are having 5 years down the road, right, across the world. But we had that in 2014. And so people talk about all sorts of different things with 500,000 people on the street, many more online. And we supported each of the deliberations with the digital tool that enable people to recap what has happened, to enable real-time live stream so that humor spreads faster than rumor, to make sure that people can engage in this massive online and offline listening experience. It was totally non-violent in the Occupy Parliament. And so after 3 weeks, people came to a consensus of 4 demand, not one less. And it was approved by the head of the parliament. So it was a very successful Occupy. And at the end of that year, every mayor who supported the Occupy gets elected, sometimes without preparing an inauguration speech. And everybody who was not for the Occupy lost their mayoral seat, which is why at this moment, even though there's 4 or 5 or many, anyway, parties in our parliament, every single one of them has signed on the Open Government Partnership, Open Parliament Network Declaration, because that's like the one thing that keeps them re-elected. And so that's really changed the political norm in Taiwan. Anyone who was against transparency or accountability simply doesn't get a seat in office.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's a nice way to kind of wrap up our time together. And I do want to thank you, Minister Tang. And before we leave, I'm going to turn it over to a friend and colleague of mine, Ben Trevino, who's going to just wrap up the meeting. And Ben is actually leading the Code for Hawaii effort in Hawaii. We did look at the hackathon in Taiwan. It's just that we were a little late, and we look forward to participating with it next year. But I'll turn it over to Ben. Thank you very much.
Mahalo, Christine. This was such an incredible conversation. I have been furiously taking notes for the last hour and really did a pathetic job of trying to keep up. There was so much ground covered, but I do want to say some things just to thank the different organizations that have been involved in this, particularly with respect to my own different identities. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the sustainability planner for HEART. So I'm a government worker. And from that perspective, I really want to thank Christine and Transform Hawaii Government for the work that they do to look at the kinds of things that we do in the public sector and offer support in transformation. I am also an Omidyar Fellow, and I want to thank the Hawaii Leadership Forum for being open to these kinds of conversations, for supporting them, and for investing in people, and for just having a really lovely staff of people that love Hawaii and really want to support community. And of course, I want to thank Minister Tang. You covered so much ground. As a technologist, my background is in computer science. I'm a civic tech volunteer, and to see the leadership that you provide and the vision is such an inspiration for somebody like me who's just a volunteer and showing up to hackathons and trying to make a difference. So I really, really, really look up to what you do and how you frame it. And I was thinking about this conversation as sort of, it's like science fiction. You're providing us this window into a world that seems possible, but it's not the world that in Hawaii that we live in. Yes, live long and prosper. So thank you for that. And finally, I want to thank everyone on this call. I think Digital Minister Tang really said it well. The team is really the team is the 23 million residents and of our community, and I consider all of you and all the work that you do. I know some of you, and I don't know all of you, but I consider you all part of the team that we are on trying to do together. So thank you all for taking the time to have this conversation. As Christine mentioned, we are really interested in some of the tools that we've learned about through the process of meeting the digital minister and having these conversations, Polis being one of them. So one thing that we'll do is send out a follow-up email to everybody who is on that signed up for this webinar and discuss some places to have some next steps. One of those places is the Code for Hawaii meetup. We have a meetup tonight. And we'll send out information about that. But we're really looking forward to having, transformation doesn't happen without action. And so we are excited to take some of those actions coming up soon. So that's what I have to say. And with that, I'll turn it back over to my colleague and dear friend, Christine. Thank you for hosting this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining. And we do know that Minister Tang actually has to get to a cabinet meeting in half an hour our time. So we appreciate your time and look forward to connecting with you further in the future. Aloha, everyone.